episode of the Urban Love Discussion Series. I'm Lakshita.
And I'm Riddhi.
I'm Professor Arnab Bose.
I'm Lana Fatima.
I'm Hriday Moore.
And we're going to discuss about animal rights and the issues concerning animal rights. How this discussion series started was I thought to myself a kind of an ethical statement, which is if humans do not understand animal rights, will AI understand human rights? And I have now, I took this question and I asked various kinds of LLM models to provide a commentary on whether AI will understand human rights if humans do not understand animal rights. And AI is very clear, the LLM models, that humans have to consider animal rights. So we actually have two sets of students. To my left, Hriday and Lana have undergone certain understanding of principles of animal rights, and here is
Riddhi
And Lakshita.
who haven't studied animal rights and the processes. So we'll have a discussion on people who have learned something about animal rights and people who haven't. Now, my first question, which I understood earlier, was, maybe before I go to the questions, I'd ask Hriday to kind of summarize what are the arguments which are happening in this.
Right. So basically, to begin with, we need to understand that every animal, every being that can feel pain or happiness or whatever emotion, they have to be attributed and they have to be understood by other species and mainly human beings because they can't speak. We have to be the voice for the voiceless. So when we read, we saw inhuman animals slaughter and different practices which are not very good, and we do not want to continue those because we would not like it if that happened to humans. We would not want to be killed in a way that we don't want to be killed in. And when we kill animals, their eyes bulge out, and there was a case when Australia stopped exporting cows to Indonesia. Why? Because there was a video that got leaked from Indonesia about how the animals were being slaughtered out there. It was completely inhuman and it can trigger something inside a human being as well. So, to talk about it, it seems like we have to acknowledge the fact that yes, they feel the same pain that humans do. It's just that humans can express it and animals can't.
Correct. Lana, your thoughts?
My thoughts would be, like Hriday said, one thing, acknowledgement of them as beings. First of all, a lot of countries have acknowledged them as legal beings. Some haven't. And while in some countries there are laws, it isn't being enforced or it's not even regulated on how animals are treated. Like Hriday said, they're a voiceless creature, and if we don't regulate and if we don't look at the welfare for them, then who will?
Okay. So, in our understanding, and what AI basically said was that we must have some mandatory ethical treatment standards, and maybe as human beings we do not understand animal rights issues that well. So you have not studied animal rights, I'm aware of that, but how are you perceiving today's discussion? Is it a relevant discussion, or this is just this is a kind of an irrelevant
Yeah,
discussion?
so personally I think it's a very relevant discussion because a lot of the times we ignore how animals are treated, and I think we only look at pets and the love towards them only goes to like domestic animals, and we don't really care about cattle or the meat we consume. But one question that strikes to me is, if slaughter itself is a very harmful thing, like no animal would want to be slaughtered, but what is ethical slaughtering? How does it matter to them if...
Okay, ethical
Right.
slaughtering.
Yes.
And you?
Personally, I agree with whatever Hriday, Lana and you just mentioned. But then again, when it comes to AI, I have a very limited understanding towards this. So do you think AI's understanding is always going to be this limited, or do you feel like there's going to be some sort of change in the future?
Okay, that's an interesting subject itself, but let's go into ethical treatment. So, number one, what are we essentially talking about? We are talking about beings which are conscious and sentient, and they have a qualia of pain. Now, we have to understand what these three words means: consciousness, sentience, and qualia. Consciousness is a degree of by which a particular entity is aware of itself. Okay. In fact, there are many. There's a Nobel laureate in physics who said that AI is conscious, but it might not be sentient. Sentient means not only are you aware of yourself, self-awareness, you can feel. And qualia is that feeling of pain. Qualia can be feeling of many things, but in this particular thing is feeling of pain. And here when we are saying of animal rights or any kind of rights like women's rights, persons with disability rights, it is a degree of inclusion. How I will define inclusion is the institutional response to reduce the qualia of pain. So there are people, for example, if you understand that I am feeling pain, you would try to reduce my pain. Okay, in a particular way. For example, now we know that animals feel pain, and human beings are extremely dependent on animals. Whether you are a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian, animals are in our ecosystem, so we can have them as pets. So what are the correct things to do and the do's and don'ts when you're having pets? If you are a non-vegetarian, you have to look into the life cycle of how animals are farmed, etc. And even wildlife and what we are doing with the wildlife and the ever increasing human habitation and how wildlife is getting affected. So animals are getting pained. And the question of, so what AI is essentially saying is that look, animal rights are deeply connected to human ethics, environmental sustainability and AI ethics. Okay, addressing these issues requires legal, economic and cultural shifts. This discussion is essentially a step in the right direction. India has the correct knowledge system before it became an independent country. So we have certain knowledge systems which promote animal rights, and it is across all religions, okay, which we have studied. And in the next podcast, we'll go very granularly on animal sentience and what we can do with respect to the entire ecosystem awareness. With respect to your question on AI, okay, it is becoming extremely important that there are a lot of statements that the world is within 2 years of artificial general intelligence, robots making independent decisions. Okay, AI is now giving us this time to understand what pain is to a realm which is different to ours. Okay, it is a realm different to ours. If you look into the discourse on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you'd also think that, you know, not every human being thought that other human beings feel pain. Okay, or they need not be. So there was slavery and things like that. Now we have said, no, universally we ban slavery because we have understood that being a slave, no one wants to live that life. Now we have also understood that animals do feel pain. For example, pigs might have sentience which is more than dogs. So we can understand dogs, but pigs also feel a lot of pain. And there's an incredible amount of torture which is associated with animal right now. So if there is immediate action, especially for good ethical governance, which AI itself is saying, okay, we have to be very careful with respect to animal rights. Okay, so with that, I would kind of end this, but this is our first discussion series, and in the next discussion series, we will look at various things very granularly, where we would be looking at different types of animals, the kind of pain and consciousness and sentience they have. Then we would look into the processes, for example, how chicken farming can happen in a more ethical way, including milk, and production of milk can happen in a more ethical way. So these are the various kinds of questions which we have. Any other things before we say bye for the first week in animal sentience? Yeah.
Also incorporate how India is lacking behind than other nations which have already implemented humane ways of slaughtering animals.
Right. That's a particularly important point because human knowledge systems have actually known that animal sentience exists for a very long time, yet we do not have an animal sentience laws, but European Union does. Actually, we should be the country to look into animal sentience. We have Jainism is a
Jainism,
marker.
The concept of
ahimsa. And how the syncretic Abrahamic religions have also grown, okay, including Sikhism and so many other religions which we have, which are known to regard animal sentience in a good way. Okay, any thoughts?
Yeah, also Professor had mentioned that to be at a position where people sort of sympathize more with animals, we need some economical, legal and cultural shifts. So I
Yes.
think in our next episode we would also be interested to know what specifically he meant
Yeah,
by that
absolutely.
and dive into that a little more.
Absolutely. So this is our first one. Please stick around for the next fuse on animal sentience. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.